How about a nice big round of applause for Scott Wilkerson?
Thanks, Paul. Did everybody have a good time last night on the boat? So today we're going to do getting started with Nagios Network Analyzer, which is a product that we came out with last year at last year's Nagios World Conference. Nagios Network Analyzer is a product that allows you to take net flow data from various devices. They can be network switches and routers, or they could even be individual Linux systems or Windows systems. And you can take data and find out like who's talking to who, what IP address is talking to what IP address, and on what port they're communicating. You also have the ability to take that data and find out how much traffic's being transmitted in each communication, how long it lasted, et cetera. So some of the questions that Network Analyzer helps you fulfill is, which devices on your network are communicating the most? If you have a device that maybe is communicating on ports that you know are potentially problematic, where maybe security vulnerabilities or viruses can be distributed. Additionally, looks like my slide might be a little messed up. Sorry about that. They can be used for if you're like an internet service, or you wanted to monitor if your internet service provider is meeting their SLA agreement for your organization. So they may have you may have requirements with them to make sure that they provide a certain quantity of uptime and that you're getting the data throughput that you require. And Network Analyzer can do items like that. You also can collect data out of there that will show you like how much data is being transmitted to or from a particular IP in your infrastructure on a daily or hourly or weekly or monthly basis. In addition to all of those, it's, as I kind of mentioned just a moment ago, it can be used to determine if a security threat is possibly, or a security breach is happening, because you can see what machines are communicating to where, and that can be anywhere on the network. Specifically, if you use Network Analyzer attached to a switch or a router that's actually sending all of the net flow data. So if everything's funneling through one device or several devices, you can have all of that net flow data sent into Network Analyzer, and then you can analyze it as you see fit. So what is net flow? For those not familiar with net flow, as this is kind of a getting started session, a lot of high-end switches and routers, and even some of the lower-end ones now, are starting to come with net flow capabilities. It basically takes information on the communications that happens between devices on and off your network. So everything that goes through a net flow-enabled device, such as a switch, a router, you can take the information from those communications, the source IP, destination IP, source port, destination port, how many packets were transmitted, how many bytes were transmitted, and have that sent off to a NetFlow collector, which is what Nagios Network Analyzer is. So it's a NetFlow analysis solution that gives you the ability to take that data in, ingest it, and put it in a format where you can query and drill down into view detailed specifics. In addition to that, it also has some nice visualizations, as many of our products do. So you can visualize that data in multiple different ways. We have various graphs, and you can drill down to the information that's important to you. You also have the ability to segment data down and keep long-term data of things that are really important. Say, for example, SSH connections. You want to make sure that you're monitoring how many, what type of communication is happening. And you can do that, and you can filter and only store that data for the long haul, which gives you the ability to keep the detailed information for what's important, and then just let the rest just kind of expire and move along. So it's really useful tool for being able to dig into, do some network security analysis, as well as are you having a flood on your network? Is there like a packet flood? And where is that coming from? What devices are talking a lot, and who are they talking to? So you can find out where the problems lie and address them appropriately. And then we're going to also just kind of cover how you can get started in using Network Analyzer. As with all of our tools, it comes with a fully functional 60-day trial. So what is NetFlow? NetFlow is a mechanism that allows you to basically collect data from devices on your network, and it gives information about the communications between them, as I described. The information that is collected in the NetFlow packets, so to speak, that are sent to Network Analyzer, as I mentioned, it's the source port, or destination port, source IP, destination IP, how many packets were transmitted in the session, how many bytes were transmitted, et cetera. And so, I guess I'm gonna slide off. So it's got the who, what, when, where, and how long they communicated. So from that information, if you put it in a logical format where you can drill down and only focus on maybe your top devices that are talking, or you maybe want to drill in and find out who's communicating on a specific port, inbound or outbound, you can drill into that information and query it with a logical query language that's built into Nagios Network Analyzer. So Nagios Network Analyzer takes the information that comes in or from all of your devices. And like I mentioned, these can be switches, routers, individual systems, Linux or Windows systems, and we pass that data into Nagios Network Analyzer. Once the information's in Nagios Network Analyzer, you can take actions on that. If you have information that you want to make sure that the quantity of data being transmitted on a specific port to or from specific machines, we can analyze that data and then pass it off to our happy admin. And he has the ability to query that information at any point into the future to do further analysis on that. In addition to that, it gives them the ability to create alerts. So if things go over a certain pattern, if you have a lot of data from a particular machine or to a particular port, inbound or outbound, you can create alerts in Nagios Network Analyzer to send those off to your monitoring software, or again, send them via email directly to you. So Nagios Network Analyzer just gives you the ability to see what's really happening on your network. It's kind of like in the graphic above, we have an interstate. It's a busy interstate. And there's a lot of vehicles, and some of them are big, representing large transmissions or large packets of data, and some of them are small and speeding by really quick. Nagios Network Analyzer gives you the ability to drill down using some quick GUI interface tools to drill down and look at the details of a specific communication between one device and another. It also allows you to really detect like intrusion and compromises, because if you know that certain machines should not be communicating on specific ports and they shouldn't be making outbound communications or inbound communications, Network Analyzer gives you the ability to say, hey, if there's anything communicating other than these particular ports, we need to know about it, and we need to know about it right away. So it also gives you the ability to do in-depth analysis, and then there's some advanced reporting, so you can also determine like, who are the top talkers on this network or this network segment or in this IP range or range of IPs, who's communicating the most and where are they communicating to? What type of information are they sending? So we're going to kind of cover some basic terms in Network Analyzer, and then we'll walk through all of the different elements of the user interface. The first element is the dashboard. So the dashboard is your main login screen. It gives you the ability to see at a glance the different places you're collecting NetFlow information from, the quantity of data that is being stored on your Network Analyzer server. Because the NetFlow packets, while they don't contain the full packet information, they don't actually have the content of what was said, they do know who talked to who, and that actually can accumulate to a very large amount of data. So we give you a quick at-a-glance view of how much data each of your sources or inputs into Network Analyzer is taking up on your hard drive. In addition to that, we have some alerting that's built into Network Analyzer, and you can see any alerts that have been triggered in the most recent alert cycle. So generally, it's like every few minutes it checks to see if any of the alerts that you have specified come up, and they will display on the dashboard as well as send them off to remote systems like your Nagios Core or Nagios Xi system. Next we have, from the alerting menu, if alert is triggered, so we have a red box here, that means an alert was triggered within that time frame. What we can do is we can select to drill in to view the detailed specifics in a graph or a table format, giving you the IP address, the source port, and destination IP. In addition to that, for that same time frame, you can see who were the top talkers based on port, IP, et cetera. So the next term is sources. In Network Analyzer, we call everything that's coming inbound to a specific port a source. So you can set up one or more sources, and you can have one or more devices sending to the same source. The ability to create multiple sources just gives you the ability to segment your data within Network Analyzer down to logical groups. In some organizations, these may be particular departments, or it may be one data center. You want to be able to segment them separately. But you can and do have the capability to just set up one source and have everything come in and all be aggregated together. But because that's an easy way to set it up, we've also created a concept of sources and source groups. So you can, if you do have multiple groups and you want the high-level view, you can aggregate them all together into one view as a source group. For each of your sources, there's 5 tabs. And when you're looking at an individual source, you have like a summary overview, and then there's some reporting capabilities for each of your individual sources. The ability to drill in and query the information on the individual source. And then we have a concept of views, which we'll cover in just a moment, and alerts for each source. As I mentioned, we have the ability to take multiple sources and aggregate them together into a source group. So all of the reporting and visualization capabilities can be either individually on an individual source, or you can group them and aggregate them together. Say, for example, if you want an organization-wide view, you could just have all of your sources compact together into a source group, and you can do your visualizations on that. So each source is where the data is coming from. That's the logical setup. But as I had mentioned, you can set it up multiple ways. You can send up one source, send all the data in. For each source on the main page, you get a view, a graphical representation. And in this view, we have the bandwidth or bytes triggered. So we can see a bandwidth graph, and we have the bytes triggered. However, you also have the ability to get a graph based on how many flows were received on this particular source, how many packets of data were being received. And we also can do bytes per second. So you can toggle multiple of the visualizations. And then below that, there's the top 5 talkers. And this is just kind of a default view to give you just a high-level overview. These are the top 5 talkers based on IP, or source IP, destination IP, source port, or destination port. By clicking on any of the IP addresses in the tables below, you actually will drill right in to view details that only contain those particular elements. So if you want to see your top talker, you want to see all of the communications that happened for that particular IP or that particular host name, you simply click on it and it will drill you right in to view the detailed specifics. So yeah, I could have gave you the better view there. Sorry about that. So if you're doing by port, if you want to see all the communications for port 80, you simply select the 80, and it will show you then a list that is sortable to see what devices are going to destination port 80 or port 22. Inbound for port 22 may be of more interest to you to be able to analyze what's going on. On the Reports tab, we have some awesome visualizations. So we have these chord diagrams at the top, and there's 4 different ones. There's a pie chart, and then there's 3 chord diagrams that basically give you an outlay of like who's talking to who. And the chord diagrams are nice because you can hover over the individual elements of them and see which machines have talked to other machines. And it will size them based on the quantities of the communications. So if you have multiple communications, you're going to see several different visualizations there. Once we drill in to look at the details of the queries, we see we have another chord diagram that's kind of a relational map. This doesn't show every communication. It shows there's a limiting factor that's available in the setting that's available in the administration section, because while these visualizations are really cool, if you have machines that talk to tens or hundreds of thousands of machines, it very quickly becomes too much information to visualize within the chord diagrams. But what we're looking at here is the ability to set up a custom query. So if you drill down and you want to view detailed specific information, or if you click on any of the elements in the previous screen, it's going to dive you into the custom queries. And as you can see in the box in the top left-hand side, we have the ability to aggregate the data by either source IP, destination IP, source port, destination port, or any combination thereof. And then in the field below, the query syntax is actually quite easy. You just basically specify that you want to see items where the source IP matches a certain mask. So you could have either a full IP address or a portion of an IP address, and it will match all of those. Or in addition to that, if you wanted to see all communications on a specific port to or from a specific port, you simply specify source port equals 22 or destination port equals 22. And this is going to give you a more detailed view to be able to drill down into the data. So on the reporting tab, we have the ability, let's see if I can go back here. On the reports tab, when you create reports, you specify how many items you want to see in the report. Do I want to see like the top 5, the top 20, the top 100 talkers on the network for specific ports or destination? When you get drilled into the queries, it's a little more detailed, and this is going to give you a table that's pageable, so you can continue to page in, and all of the links will drill you into even a further sorted down query. So while the query language is nice and easy, you don't have to manually write all the queries. Simply by clicking on the different elements in the table, it's going to drill you in and write the query for you, taking into a more detailed view. So there's a sorry about that. There's an up-close view of what the query language looks like, and you have the ability to specify your time frame. Now, one thing that I will mention here is when we do a source setup, the quantity of data that we keep is specifiable. So if you want to keep all of the data that's coming in for all of your net flow for a certain amount of time and then have it kind of just go out of the system, you do have the ability to specify the quantity of time. So some data is maybe more important and you want to keep for a longer time period for look back, but other data is like, if I didn't look at it in the last week, then I don't need to see it any further. One thing to note, though, is in the time frame that you have specified, when you're running queries, you can only look back as far as the data that you're storing. So if you're only storing data for 24 hours by default, then you're only going to be able to look back 24 hours to see that. If you do a week or a month, you'll have a longer look back period. However, the trade-off there is quantity of disk space. So you're going to be accumulating massive amounts of data, and it's how long you want to store that data. That's important. Which brings us to views. The concept of views in Nagios Network Analyzer gives you the ability to take specific data, or data that you're interested in, and store it for a much longer period of time. So if you set up a source and you only want to keep all of the data that you're collecting for 24 hours, but then there's some specific information that you may want to keep for weeks or months or even years, because they could be potentially threats or SSH attempts or whatever. So what you can do is you can create a view, and that will take the portions of data that are important to you, keep them for a longer time period that you get to specify. You choose how long you want to keep your data. That's up to your organization. And the views give you the ability to get rid of all of the stuff that you don't need to keep for a long period of time and keep the items that are important to you or your organization for as long as you'd like. So next we're going to talk about alerting. Alerting in Nagios Network Analyzer basically gives you the ability to create an alert based on the information that you provide. As I mentioned earlier, we have sources and source groups and now views that we've just added in here. So when you decide to create an alert in Nagios Network Analyzer, first you're going to choose where the data is coming from that you're going to create your alert on. It can either be an individual source, it could be a source group, or it could be a customized view that had that longer retention period that you had specified earlier. So you're going to give it a name, select whether it's a source or source group. If you select source, you're going to get a list of all of your sources to choose from. Source group, again, you'll get a list of all of the source groups you have configured. And then within the sources or source groups, if you want to narrow it further or expand it, I guess, to use a view, you can select a view from the menu. And then we're going to just specify some criteria. So we have the ability to analyze the data by how many bytes were transferred, how many packets were transferred, how many flows were received. And then we can specify thresholds in standard Nagios format if it's over this, under this, inside the range, outside the range. You can specify the threshold format. And then you can specify some criteria. So I'm interested if the bytes are more than a megasecond, or I'm interested if there's more than 2 communications on where the destination port is 22, or whatever. So you can choose whether it's where the destination or the source, IP or port is, matches the item that you have in there. So if the communication is inbound and the quantity of items, be it packets or flows or bytes, is inside or outside of the range that you have specified, then we'll go ahead and generate an alert. So alerts in Nagios Network Analyzer, similar to how we had set up log server and talked about that yesterday, we give you multiple options. So you can send alerts multiple ways. You can either send an email directly to the user that you choose. That's a Network Analyzer user on your system. Or you can ship those off to a Nagios server. Let's see if I guess I don't have a screenshot of that. You can ship them off, yeah, actually I do, to a Nagios server. So you can set up a Nagios server which will receive, that can receive NRDP data. Now if it's a Nagios core system, NRDP is not installed by default, but you can download it from the Nagios Exchange and give that the ability for your core system to receive the alert via NRDP. So once you set up your server, you just put in your server credentials, your NRDP token, and then you're going to create a new host or service that you want the alert to be posted to, because Nagios obviously can receive passive alerts for any number of hosts and services, and you actually may have one Network Analyzer server sending alerts to multiple hosts and services on your monitoring server. So you can add the host and the host name and the service name that you want it to report itself as it comes into your monitoring software. We do have some tight integration that we've created with Nagios Xi, and a lot of this came out of, again, the Ask Nagios session that we had last year. We launched this product last year just before the conference, and some of our partners came to us right away in the Ask Nagios session and were like, this product is awesome, but can we have some tighter integration in with Nagios Xi? And so what we did is right off the bat, we're like, yeah, that's awesome. We had reports created, which we're going to see here, but we went ahead and did a lot further than that, and we put a tab right on the host detail page. So when you're in Nagios Xi and you have it configured to communicate with your Network Analyzer server, when you're looking at any host, it actually queries the Network Analyzer server on that tab and says, you know what? Show me the most recent communication between this host and anything else. Any NetFlow data that we have for this particular host, we display a table right within the host detail page. And then there's quick links to drill right into queries on your Network Analyzer server that contain that host either to or from as the source or destination port. So what we have on the screen here is also integrated reports in Nagios Xi. Once you set up the integration between the two, which really consists of telling Nagios Xi where your Network Analyzer lives, what its host name is, and an API key, the reports are automatically generated. So we have a network report that's going to give us a high-level view, and it's actually will take all of the reports that you've configured in Network Analyzer and bring them into Nagios Xi for display. So if you create custom reports, they're all displayed right in Nagios Xi as well, which gives us a really cool feature as a side effect, because for those that are familiar with Nagios Xi, we have the ability to, in the enterprise version, you can actually create automated alerts that go out on interval. So on the first of the month or on the Monday morning, you can have just a high-level view of a particular report being ran. And you can have that emailed to you or your manager or supervisor or whatever at the time of your choosing, so it can run the report automatically in Xi and just ship it off, which is really cool. So we have the same chord diagrams in here, as well as the ability to view in table format all of your reports. User management in Network Analyzers is quite easy. You just set up users. You can choose whether they're admins or regular users. And when we get around to the integration piece within the next year, likely, the user management for all the products will be integrated together. But for now, you have a choice of setting them up as a user or an admin, and then you can also give that user API access. So when you give a user API access, Network Analyzer actually has a fully functional backend API where calls can be made from external systems to get the detailed information. So all of the information that's displayed on any of the pages, you can run queries from an API. You can get all of the reporting information from an API. You can extract that information and use that in external systems however you like. You can take the data. It's all available in JSON format. You just simply query it, and it spits out the results. So the next question is, how do we get started with Network Analyzer? As I mentioned, there's a 60-day trial. The product's been out for a year, so you can download it from our standard www.nagios.com. You just click on download. It's fully functional. There's no limitations in the trial, so you can take the work that you use when you trial the product, and actually, if you decide to purchase the product, you can deploy that right out into the wild. If you have any further questions besides what we can cover here today, or you come up with something in the next hour or two, like, oh, I wish I would have asked that, you can definitely feel free to stop by our Jumpstart sessions downstairs. We have technicians that'd be more than happy to walk you through any of that. And we also have the Network Analyzer available on the demo tables outside. So with that, I will go ahead and break for questions.
Hi. We currently have NetFlow data being sent to a server, and it's saved to disk in flow files, and then we use an open source tool called Flow Tools to analyze it.
Yep.
Can I have the Nagios Analyzer analyze those files, or does it have to be sent directly to Nagios on a port?
That's a good question. I'm pretty sure that it would be possible, but I don't exactly know what you'd have to do. We'd have to do some work to figure that out. The reason why I say I'm pretty sure it's possible is because we use a similar tool. So as the flows come into the tool, we actually store it in the flow files, at least on a temporary basis, until we inject it or suck it in, depending on the quantity of time or the intervals that you specify. So it will stay in flow files for your source time, and then we read out of that and inject a lot of the information into a backend database for longer storage or RRD files, et cetera. It's probably possible because I'm guessing that the flow files are the same. So we may be able to, like if you needed to do an import of historical data or something like that, we could probably work with you to figure something out. Maybe we could dump the flow files in there, tell it how to read them. Then you could get the data in there. But going forward, it really does expect the data to come in on a port. Now the port you can specify, so I don't know if your existing system has the ability to store and forward. Because you could, if you already have it going to one central location, if it has some type of store and forward functionality, you could maybe use that for your collection that you have, and then forward a copy onto Network Analyzer for analysis.
I just wanted to clarify, you talked about the Nagios Xi integration.
Yep.
For Core, is it primarily that this will send alerts that Core will pick up and then forward?
That's a great question. So there's a couple different options there. In Core, you can have, let me see if I can go back here. I had the, when you're setting up alerts, go back here. When you're setting up alerts, you can specify passive checks to be sent to Core via NRDP. So you could add an NRDP receiver to core. It's available on the exchange, and it could send an alert passively. In XI, one thing that I actually didn't even mention in the presentation, I don't know how I missed this, but in XI we also have a wizard set up. So in XI, for those that are familiar, there's wizards that walk through, but there is a plugin. So because all of the data is available via API, we actually have a plugin that you can use on core and actually query the data directly. So within your core system, you absolutely can use this, and you can actively check the API from core using the plugin, or you can use the setup to passively send the results to core, whatever works out best for your environment. So you can do it both ways.
Yeah, do you have the multi-tenant type capability? So specifically, I want to restrict users as to what sources they're allowed to look at. I saw the user screen there, but I couldn't see if I could specifically assign only a certain source that they're allowed to look at or sources.
No, that's a great question. It is not in there, but I'll add that to the feature request list because actually that would be very valuable. I can see that.
So is there a way to see who initiated the session in the NetFlow data?
So, kind of. So the source is going to be who's starting the session, and the destination is going to be where they were going, on either direction. So the initiator is generally the source, but I guess theoretically it wouldn't always be that way. Generally, the source is going to be who's initiating the communication.
But it's not a true TCP session starter.
Correct. That is actually a good point. So one thing that I had mentioned earlier is while the information that we have in the Network Analyzer and that NetFlow sends, we know who talked to who. So we know the source and the destination IP. We know how much data was transmitted, and we know how many flows were transmitted and how many packets. But it isn't a tool to do like packet sniffing and actually see the headers of all of the communication. That's not what it was designed to do, and so that information is not available.
And would UDP flows be displayed as well there?
Yeah.
I have a couple of questions. The first one is on the source groups.
Yep.
Can a source exist in multiple source groups?
Yes.
Similar to XI and host groups? Then?
Yep. So you can create multiple source groups. Well, obviously, in order to, or want to create a source group, you'd have to have multiple sources. Mm-hmm. But yeah, you could have one source group one source can be a member of one or zero or more source groups. So yeah, you can have as many source groups as you want, and they can contain different elements. And to the point that was made over here, it would make absolute sense, and we'll add that so we can, where you can choose whether particular users or members of particular groups or teams will have access to individual sources or groups of sources, depending on their team membership.
And the last question, I don't think I asked you individually, but if we have a large number of switches and routers to add, 200, 300, today we would have to add them individually?
No. And that's a point that I tried to make, but maybe wasn't really clear. So you can add them individually if that works best for being able to break up the data, but you can add one source and point it. So when you add a source to Network Analyzer, this may make it a little bit clearer. What you're doing is you're actually just creating a port on the system that it's listening on. So you specify what port, like I want to listen for NetFlow data on port 5000. And so it will listen for all NetFlow data coming into port 5000. Then when you configure your switches and routers to send, you tell it what port you're going to send it to and send it to port 5000. You can, the port's arbitrary. You can set them up as many as you want. So if you want to logically break up your sources into, to segment them, to know, besides the fact that they ran across a certain switch or only certain IP ranges may exist on the backside of one of your switches, you can send all the data to one source.
Okay.
So it actually, you don't have to break it up like that. It just gives you the ability to logically separate it. The benefit to separating it out on, into multiple sources or multiple groups is that's another logical filtering point. If you're only interested in looking at information from a particular data center, for example, you can, if you have all of the switches in that data center being sent to one source, then you can filter down to that, before you do your other filtering, by IP or port or whatever. So you have the logical ability to narrow that down, but you don't have to.
Okay, thank you.
So obviously NetFlow adds a little bit of bandwidth needs and things like that as it's sending the flows, but how real time is the data and how quickly will this process the data?
It's near real time. It's like within seconds. I mean, provided obviously there's not massive network latency or something. But generally speaking, your switches and routers are going to pump the data in real time. Now, one thing that doesn't update like in real time are some of the graphs that you saw, like the bandwidth graph. I think that, I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but I think they might update on like a 5-minute interval or something like that. And the quantities of data might update on a 5-minute interval, but you can drill in to view more detailed sampling. The tables of data where the who's talking to who, those are updated in near real time because the data is queried directly, directly out of the system and they're reaped continuously.
So we recently inherited a bunch of Windows servers in Amazon, and I was just wondering if there's any types of integrations there. I looked at the NetFlow or SFlow, and it doesn't appear that there's any free open source clients to send that traffic.
There is one, but I'll be damned if I can remember what it's called. But if you catch me later or ask them outside, so there's some systems that you can send Windows NetFlow data directly to Network Analyzer from an individual system. In your organization, I'm not 100% positive on this, but you may actually be able to use like a virtual router in Amazon to send the NetFlow data. They may have something like that, like you could put some type of a virtual network device in Amazon that can send NetFlow data. I'm not 100% positive, but I thought I heard something about that. But for sure, there is the ability to send NetFlow data from Windows systems directly. On the downside is it's from a system as opposed to collecting, you have to install it on, to send the data for individual systems, as opposed to when you're, monitoring a whole network segment and everything through a switch or everything through a router automatically happens. In the Windows environment, if you can't put those behind something that can send the data, you would have to do it on all of them. But it would still be available.
Sure, I just didn't see any free options.
Yeah, there is 100% sure there is a free option. I don't remember what it's called. But if you catch me after the session or if you stop by the Quick Start tables, they'll be able to pull it up. We have some documentation that's already created on how to send NetFlow data from Windows devices. It was a year ago, and I don't remember what it's called, but it is available.
Sure, no problem. It's hard to get any other information out of cloud, so.
Yeah.
All right, we have time for one more question.
I am not familiar with NetFlow, but if I just have my Nagios Xi setup, and I've already got network devices in a host group, can I tell Network Analyzer to start monitoring all the devices that are already in this host group?
So that's a good question, and unfortunately the answer is no. Because NetFlow, the NetFlow data, you have to have the devices send the data into Network Analyzer, as opposed to some of the traditional active monitoring where you're reaching out to the device and saying, I need this information. So It works kind of the other way. You'll have to have the devices send the data in as opposed to it actively reaching out. If there was a way to do that, that would be awesome. But unfortunately, at this time, at least, there's no way to actively reach out to the machines and say, give me all your NetFlow data.
All right, well, how about a nice big round of applause one more time for Scott Wilkerson. Thank you so much, Scott. We really